I have no doubts that every kernel release window has its struggles. I've talked about many of them on this channel, and I'm sure a lot of these struggles are worse than the others. But it seems like the universe, Mother Nature, God, whatever you want to blame, simply does not want this kernel to exist, because the 6.8 development window has been absolutely nothing but trouble. To start everything off, we have this email from Linus on January 10th. This is a reply to Ingo Molnar from January 8th. Just a note that I'm currently bisecting into this merge for a horrendous performance regression. It makes my empty kernel build go from 22 seconds to 44 seconds, and makes a full kernel build enormously slower too. I haven't finished the bisection, but it's now inside just this pull, so I can already tell that I'm going to revert something in here, because this has been making my merge window miserable. You've been warned, Linus. 22 to 44 seconds might not sound like that much, but that is a 50% performance degradation, so if you go and compile the entire kernel, it's probably going to take at least twice as long to do. And when you are someone like Linus, who is going to be doing this on a fairly regular basis, that starts to add up really, really quickly. Now, I've seen a lot of people confused about how regression in the kernel could have massively slowed down build time. Like, what could you possibly have added that went unnoticed that could possibly do that? That would make sense in most situations, where the software you're compiling is different from the software you're running. That's not what Linus is doing here. When Linus is compiling the kernel, he's also then running that kernel. So the first time you build it, it's going to look fine. If you then try to build another kernel, and maybe there is an issue that is limiting your clock speed, for example, that is then going to slow down every subsequent build. This isn't just a kernel developer thing. Go ask a KD developer, go ask Vaxry about Hyperland. Most developers are not using a stable version of the software. Instead, they're using usually like the latest git commit, because if something goes wrong, if something doesn't compile like it should, if there's a regression, they are likely going to be one of the first people that spot that there is a problem. And Linus, being the Linux kernel guy, wants to be in that position where something gets caught way before it's a serious problem. Now, obviously, Linus would prefer if regressions didn't make their way to him, and Linus isn't going to be able to check every single thing that comes into the kernel, but in a lot of cases, especially in things like this where there's a really serious problem, he is going to spot it. This is often referred to as eating your own dog food, or dog fooding, where you are running the product that you're currently in the process of building. To understand truly how big this performance drop is, Linus is running an AMD Ryzen Threadripper 3970X. This is a 32-core CPU. This is definitely not like the highest of the high-end line CPU, but it's pretty high up there. After a lot of bisecting and a lot of reboots, Linus came down to 2 commits: F1256, rework IO8 boost, and 9C0B4, rework sched util governor performance estimation. One more boot to go, then I'll try to revert whichever caused my machine to perform horribly much worse. And it turns out it was the second commit. However, the first commit also had to be pulled as well, because otherwise it couldn't have been cleanly reverted. Reverting these got everything back on track, but clearly they were trying to address a problem, so ultimately the patches would need to be rewritten to be properly brought back into the kernel. This did eventually happen, after the problem was replicated by someone known as Wise Carney. This is a developer from AMD, and this was an AMD-specific problem. I'm able to reproduce this issue with my AMD Ryzen 5600G system, but only if I disable CPPC in the BIOS and boot with ACPI CPU frec plus sched util. So CPPC is a system known as Collaborative Process Performance Control, and this is the state that Linus's system was in. He had disabled this in the BIOS, or in the UEFI. Now, according to Phoronix, most AMD Zen 2 and newer systems support ACPI CPPC, and thus with modern kernels on the Ryzen side, typically use the new AMD P-State driver, but for select Zen 2 and Zen 3 systems, and older, or those disabling CPPC from the BIOS, the CPU FREC driver is still used, and typically the default CPU frequency governor is schedutil for leveraging the scheduler utilization data. So this is a problem that possibly could have snuck into an actual release if Linus didn't just happen to disable this in his BIOS. Now, it's unclear to me why Linus would have had this feature disabled. It could have been an older motherboard that just happened to have the feature still disabled, because most of the information that I can find about this is about a gaming context, where you might want to increase your minimum FPS, and in some games, they behave weirdly with this driver enabled. But besides that, I can't really find anything on it. Now, after all was said and done, this did get patched, and I'm sure Linus is very happy about seeing this. It's a single line problem. Apply a 25% margin so that we select a higher frequency than the current one before the CPU is full busy. A single line problem was basically halving his CPU clock and doubling the kernel build time. The joys of building software. But don't worry, this is just the beginning. It only goes downhill from here. Next up, we have a patch set from Dave Airley. Dave does a lot of things in the kernel and has been around for a really long time. This is related to the DRM system, not Digital Rights Management Direct Rendering Manager. This is the kernel subsystem that interacts with your GPU. I've done a conflict test against your current tree, and there are 2 quite small ones, and 1 i9-15, which is a bit larger, but it mostly is just accepting incoming code. There is 1 shared tree in here for some wireless interactions with AMD GPU over radio what? I didn't read this part before. The diff stat also seems a bit out there for some reason. When I merge and do a git diff --stat, it all looks a lot more normal. It's a tad annoying that there are a couple of conflicts, but this is normal kernel stuff, nothing to really write home about. Turns out the problem was a little bit worse than that. Your testing is seriously lacking. This doesn't even build. Wow, Linus, that is taking it way too far. Imagine expecting the code that is sent to you to be compilable. How could you ever want that? The reason seems to be that this commit here, replace custom Intel runtime _PM tracker with ref tracker library, changed the Intel wake ref t type from a depot stake handle t to unsigned long, and as a result, did this. That's not the end of it though. Meanwhile, the XC driver has this, which has never been valid, but now the build fails with this, because the DRM header files have this disgusting thing where the header file includes a C file. Nasty. I made it build by fixing that broken XC compat header file, but this is definitely not how things should have worked. How did this ever get to me without any kind of build testing? And why does a header file include a C file? That's wrong, regardless of this bug. Now, to be fair to Dave, he does agree about the build issue. This was a bad cross of trees. The fix was in a pull request in my inbox about an hour after I sent the PR. It just wasn't marked urgent, and it passes all my usual test builds. I don't know how that even happens. There might be a problem with your test builds then if code that isn't compiling is passing. Secondly, he doesn't agree about the Intel XE issue. Huh? Display power C includes i9-15 drvh, which includes i9-15 gem object.h, and include xcbo.h, include xcbo types.h, include drm mm.h. I'm not seeing the C and H. Are you reading the backtrace correctly? Considering that he made the fix that he suggested and then it started working, I'm assuming that he would be. Now, it is absolutely nothing new for terrible DRM code to be submitted. For example, this case from 2017. The tiny DRM code seems like absolute pure shit that has never seen a compiler. I'm upset because I expect better quality control. In fact, I expect some quality control, and this driver has clearly seen none at all. And those patches were apparently committed yesterday. I get tons of warnings, like this right here, with a nasty chain of nested defines, but then I get to the actual compile failures. It looks like it might compile if config backlight class device was enabled rather than being a module, and doing this gets rid of the build failure. How the hell did this get to the point where this even is sent to me? Nobody tested anything. And why was this sent to me if it was committed yesterday? Or we have this case from 2011. Quite frankly, I think it's too late for something like kexec bug fix. Nobody cares, so kexec doesn't work. That's nothing new. This doesn't smell like a regression to me, and the kcalloc things you mention sound like some kind of cleanup crap. So kexec is a way to load changes into a running kernel and then not have to reboot the system and have those changes applied. Normally, you would have to reboot your system. Anyone who tells you don't have to reboot Linux is lying to you. Stop listening to them. And if you say that yourself, stop it. The DRM layer has been fairly good for a few releases, but I'm getting the feeling that I need to start pushing back because I'm getting stuff that I don't think matters and shouldn't be sent to me after RC4. So I'm not pulling this. What the heck is up? By now, I want your fixes either fix real regressions that people care about or that help new unreleased hardware that people will care about and that cannot possibly mess up old users. kexec? Who cares? Really. Honestly, I could spend the rest of the video just talking about really dumb DRM patch sets, and maybe at some point in the future, I will have to do that. But all of this stuff is fairly normal-ish kernel stuff. Yeah, it's annoying that it's all happening at once, but that's not an act of God. Do you know where Linus is situated right now? Portland, Oregon. Do you know why that matters? Cold weather and power failures continue in aftermath of Oregon's storm. 135,000 homes and businesses were completely without power, and to this day, many of them still don't have power. And Linus wasn't that terribly affected, but he did temporarily lose power. And when he had power and internet back, he sent this up to the mailing list. Heads up, effectively offline for now. Just a note to say that the merge window is paused as far as I'm concerned, because we've lost power and internet thanks to a winter storm. Of course, this is Oregon, so storm here is what some people would probably consider somewhat windy, and winter here means the temperature is approaching -10. For context, Linus is Finnish, and this is the weather in Finland right now. This is not news. This is just Finland. The problem is the same reason why it's bad when Texas gets a little cold. US infrastructure sucks, and nobody is prepared for anything. There's apparently about 100,000 people without power, and I doubt our neighborhood is the priority, so I expect to be without power for some time still. I hope I'm wrong, but a few years ago, it took more than a week to restore power due to all the downed trees. It's hopefully nowhere near that, but... And before anybody says, just go to a Starbucks and work from there, the scariest thing out there, apart from possibly downed trees and power lines, is other drivers. I'll stay put. I would not want to be near a single other person driving on ice. Australia doesn't get cold like this, but I can guarantee for a fact that most people don't know how to drive. I've seen how they drive in rain. I only expect ice to be worse. Whilst this did throw a bit of a wrench into the mix, it's not like the kernel was just completely halted. If things got bad enough, we have a backup solution. Linus has had to step away from the kernel before, and in those cases, Greg Carl Hartman took over temporarily. If Linus said, yo, I cannot do any work right now, there's no power, there is no internet, Greg could very easily take over for the release, and then Linus comes back at a later time when everything is, calmed down a bit. But right now, a lot of things are going wrong with this kernel release. So 6.8 is going to happen eventually, but it seems like a bit of a mess. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you happen to have family in Portland, Oregon, or you yourself are there, let me know what it's like right now and hopefully stay safe. And yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. Like the video, go like the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to the Pay linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and it is not minus 10 degrees here. It's like 27°C. I don't know what that is in freedom units.